Dracula. Novel by Bram Stoker. Chapter 3. A Bag of Blood. That evening the Count said nothing about the night before. He just brought out more writing paper and asked Jonathan to write Mina 3 letters.
In the first one, say that you have almost finished your work. Say that you are going to leave in a few days.
The Count ordered him.
In the second letter, say that you are leaving the next morning. In the third, say that you have left the castle. You have arrived in Britist.
When Jonathan gave him a worried look, he explained.
The post is slow in this part of the country. I do not want your friends to think that something has happened to you. I will post these letters at the right time. Then they will know when you are going to arrive home.
Jonathan wrote the 3 letters.
I cannot refuse.
He told himself.
I have to follow his orders. I'm his prisoner here, and my life is in danger.
The next morning, Jonathan woke to the sound of voices, ordinary voices. Running to the dining room window, he looked down. Some men were taking long wooden boxes off a cart. Jonathan thought excitedly.
3 men. If I can write a letter quickly, they can take it to the outside world.
He ran to his room for the paper that he kept in his bag. But where was his bag? With his ticket and his money. Where was the suit that he traveled in, and his coat? They were not there. When he returned to the window, he could not see the men or the cart. For the rest of the day, Jonathan could hear them at work somewhere below in the castle. Something was happening. That evening he sat by his window and waited. Soon after dark, he saw movement at Dracula's window. Dracula climbed out and moved down the wall in the same way as the night before. But this time he was wearing Jonathan's clothes. Everything now became clear.
He's going to show himself in Bistritz and post the letters.
Jonathan thought.
The people will believe that he is me. They'll think that I'm already on my way home. Nobody will know that I'm still in the castle. Dracula will be able to do what he likes with me. I must escape. I have to get the key of the door. I have to get into the Count's room. But how? His room is always locked.
Then Jonathan thought of a plan.
I know his window.
He thought.
I've seen him climb out of it. It's lower than mine, to the left. The stones in the castle wall are big and rough. The spaces between them are big. If I take off my boots, perhaps I can climb down the wall into his room. It's dangerous, I know, but what can I do?
Jonathan waited until the morning. The night was too dangerous. He knew that Dracula slept during the day. He took off his boots, climbed out of his window, and moved slowly and carefully down and across the castle wall. He did not look down. Finally he arrived at the Count's window and climbed into his room.
Is this really the Count's room?
He asked himself. It was empty except for some old money on the dirty floor. And there weren't any keys. But behind a door, in the corner of the room, Jonathan found something interesting, some stone steps. He nervously started to go down them, and he noticed a strange, earthy smell. It was the smell of Dracula's breath. The smell became stronger and more unpleasant as he went down. Finally, at the bottom, there was a dark passage. He followed it, and came into a room with an earth floor. At the far end, Jonathan could see the boxes that were brought by the men with the cart. There were about 50 of them, and they were all now filled with earth. Near them was another, older box. Jonathan walked across and looked inside. He stepped back with a cry. There, on a bed of earth, was Count Dracula. At first Jonathan thought he was dead. His eyes were open, and his face was pale. No breath came from his mouth or nose, and there was no sign of a heart in his chest. But there was something about his eyes that frightened Jonathan. They did not have the glassy look of death. They looked up into the air above him, but they were filled with a terrible hate. Jonathan wanted to find the key, but he could not touch the Count. He was too afraid. He left as quickly as he could. Then he returned to his own room. That night the Count came to Jonathan's room at his usual time.
Tonight, my friend, we must say goodbye. Tomorrow you return to your own country, and I, too, have to make a journey. In the morning my carriage will take you to the Bistritz road, and you will be in Bistritz by tomorrow evening. I hope I shall see you again at Castle Dracula.
Why can't I go tonight?
Asked Jonathan.
Because, my dear sir, my carriage is busy.
But I cannot walk. I want to go now.
And your bags?
They are not important. I can send for them later.
The Count smiled.
All right. You do not have to stay if you are ready to leave. But I am sad that you want to go so quickly.
Jonathan followed the Count down the stairs to the great door. The Count stopped, lifted his hand and said,
Listen.
From the other side of the door came the sound of wolves in the forest. Dracula unlocked the door and opened it. The sound of wolves immediately became louder. Jonathan looked through the door and saw wolves jumping up and down. Their hungry red mouths were wide open.
Shut the door. I can't wait until morning.
Cried Jonathan at last. He turned away because he did not want Dracula to see his tears. The door closed with a crash, and the sound of the wolves became quieter. The next day, in the early morning, Jonathan decided to go back to the Count's room. He felt braver now. He told himself,
The Count's going to kill me tonight if I stay. If I fall off the wall this morning, that's a better way to die.
He ran to the window. Then he climbed down and across the wall and into the Count's room. He went through the door in the corner of the room, down the steps and along the dark passage to the room with the earth floor. He walked straight to Dracula's box and lifted the top. When he looked inside, his heart almost stopped. Dracula was there, inside the box, but he looked different. His face was fatter than usual, and his skin was not white, it was the color of red wine. Blood ran from the corners of his mouth, down his neck and onto his clothes. He smelled of blood. And on his face was the look of a wild animal that has killed. Then it has fed until it cannot feed again. Jonathan could not leave now. He had to try to find the key. He searched in Dracula's pockets, but they were empty. For the first time in his life, Jonathan wanted to kill. He wanted to destroy this hateful bag of blood lying in its box. He picked up a heavy stone, lifted it above Dracula's head and dropped it. But, as the stone left Jonathan's hands, Dracula opened his eyes. For a second, the stone seemed to hang in the air. Then it fell slowly. It touched the side of Dracula's face. Softly, without hurting him. Jonathan could not move. Dracula's eyes were turning towards him and he was slowly beginning to smile. Seconds later, Jonathan turned and ran. Filled with an animal fear, he wanted to leave the boxes. the evil smell and the Count's terrible bloodthirsty smile behind him. He wanted to be as far away from them as possible. He hurried up the stairs, out of the window and up the castle wall as quickly as he could. Back in his room, he threw himself onto his bed and waited.
He's going to kill me now,
he thought. He couldn't shake the picture of Dracula's terrible smile out of his mind.
I know it. I have no hope. In a short time I'll be dead. He'll drink my blood. And then he'll go to England for fresh blood. What can I do?
He lay on his bed, shaking with fear. He waited. But, to his surprise, nothing happened. A few hours later he heard the sound of horses and of men singing. He left his bed, crossed the room and looked down from his window. There was a cart filled with wooden boxes. Inside one of them, Jonathan knew, was Dracula. He was on his way to England. For a minute Jonathan stopped feeling afraid. But then he remembered that there was still one problem. He thought,
tomorrow morning I can leave. But what will happen tonight? Dracula's away, so who will protect me from those 3 terrible women? They want my blood.
He remembered Dracula's words to them.
I will use him first. Then, and only then.
Jonathan went to his door and listened. At first there was silence. But then he heard something in the passage just outside his door. The sound of dresses, the sound of women laughing. Jonathan's fear returned. He went down on his knees, held his hands together and lifted his eyes to the sky. He cried,
please, help me, someone. Will I ever see England and Mina again?
Subscribe and like and shares. See you in the next video.